Welcome to Main Street Minds with your host, Amish Munshi. This is where industry leaders and seasoned pros share their secrets to success beyond limits. Let's dive in.
Hello and welcome to Main Street Minds. Today we have a very special guest, Ajay Murali, with us, all the way from Cedar Park, Texas, one of my favorite places. I've done multiple investments around over there as well of my own, and I know the region really well. And when the first time I was driving through Cedar Park, I was like, I can call this place home. This is so beautiful. So without any further ado, more importantly than the location is the experience that Ajay brings to us and his willingness to share it with all of us. So thanks, Ajay. Without any further delay, I'll open up the floor and you can introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Firstly, thank you, Amish, for having me on board. As you introduced, my name is Ajay Murali, born and raised in Chennai, Tamil Nadu. Currently live in Austin, Texas. I call it Austin because Cedar Park is not well known outside, but again, like the suburbs of Austin, Texas, in Cedar Park. And I work as the head of platform data science at Atlassian right now. So in my current role, I lead a bunch of diverse teams responsible for both product and platform analytics. Going back several years, my several years of experience in data and analytics have actually encompassed various facets, including data science, business intelligence, data engineering. So if you think about it, it's more about it's a conglomerate of all of these data experiences coming together, and which is sort of set me up to also think about data holistically rather than just looking at it from a data science lens or a business intelligence lens or a data engineering lens. Thankfully, over the years, I also got a ton of opportunities to work across various domains. So currently I'm in SaaS. Previously, I worked at Meta, which is predominantly social media. Before that, in the healthcare industry, and prior to that, in consulting and startups. So overall, again, seeing how data is utilized in these various forms and industries, and I learned a lot over the years. Outside of work, I'm a father of two daughters who absolutely keeps me busy. Running behind them along with my wife is literally my another full-time job. Love the outdoors, although Texas gets really hot. So ideally outdoors for me is stepping outside of Texas and visiting. And I'm a huge fan of cricket, both watching and playing cricket.
Nice. How do you manage to play about once a week or once a month?
I get to play once a week, thankfully. And that's the good part of staying in Texas. You got the heat for 10 months out of the year.
Yeah, that's perfect. Sounds great. So tell us a little bit about what got you interested in data sciences.
Yeah. So again, rolling back several years, I started my career in software engineering, and very quickly I realized that software engineering is not my cup of tea. So what I decided to do, or at least took on the opportunities, was go slowly into the database administration side and on the data side of it. And I remember the good old days of SQL Server 2005, where you're trying to set everything up from scratch, trying to understand data and so on. And at that point in time, I realized that, hey, I was always interested in mathematics, as a kid, huge fan of mathematics. And then slowly when I got into data, I was like, okay, this seems to be my cup of tea. So again, started my career more about data infrastructure, so building a lot of data foundational work, and slowly started getting into the storytelling aspect of data, and that's where data science potentially comes in, right? The big thing about data science is it's not just building fancy data sets. It's literally taking data and sort of running the business or helping the business to sort of grow. And that impact is what sort of drove me more and more into data science. And it's an evolving industry. In the world of AI, it's never ending. So the sort of the learning and knowledge, it's just constantly increasing too.
So somebody that's new in the data science field, and just from the infrastructure perspective, you did mention that it's kind of started off with a SQL Server and a little more variety within there. But what are some of the tools and technologies that are that all the way from there till today, and how is data being stored in like data lakes in the cloud computing versus what is being used in the AI? Like what are some of the tools that somebody should be learning?
No, great question. So again, going back to those days of SQL Server where everything was a Microsoft shop back then, or at least they were the pioneers and
Yeah.
still being the pioneers in this area. So started with SQL Server, sort of like slowly got into SSIS, and SSRS. So like the concept of data lake sort of existed, but in a different form back then. So like building all of these OLAP cubes, and so on. That's how sort of like storage
Mm-hmm.
was stayed back then, right? And then slowly moving into the startup world. The startups, like surprisingly, like back then, startups were the ones who were actually brave enough to go experiment with a bunch of like different technologies. And again, like in 2010s, probably Hadoop slowly like started gaining a lot of traction. So now like these Hadoop and AWS again was back then relatively new. I remember those
Yeah.
days where you were just doing those like elastic map clusters, running a bunch of like Hive queries to sort of like do your data analysis and so on. So slowly moved into the Hive slash Hadoop sort of the world. But again, until that point in time, more or less, like I was dealing with smaller data sets, like compared to the real world. But the move to Facebook, and back then Facebook and Meta right now, was when like you literally saw the wealth of data, right? You
Yeah.
saw how much data can add value, and what's the size of data assets, like what we are trying to do. The good thing with Facebook was Facebook already figured it out like pretty well. So like again, everything was still Hive based, but there was a layering on top of Hive where you can still write a bunch of like SQL based queries, where these SQL based queries were like sort of translated into this Hive world. So we call it Spark QL. So like we wrote a bunch of like Spark queries, and sort of again like dealing with a ton of like data assets.
Yeah.
Now slowly, like now we are again moving into the world of how easy is it for a data scientist to go do things. Databricks is one of those companies who I admire a lot, and again, even in the 5.5 years like I've been using Databricks, like the way they've started with it right now, and the way they've sort of progressed into more of a tool set for all of the data scientists. Like if you think about it, I don't need to head outside of this tool set. Like simple things like it's not just building my ETLs on Databricks. It's not doing my analysis on Databricks, but now like they've sort of come up with these dashboards on Databricks too. So now everything is sort of like packaged in one place. The next challenge is going to be like how do you get the stakeholders to sort of like self-serve your data assets ideally, right? Like that's when the role of a data scientist gets even better, where you build a bunch of solid foundations, train your product managers and your engineers to sort of like self-serve a lot of your own data assets, so that now you can start getting in further into modeling and AI and all of that stuff.
Yeah. So AI is most of the LLM models and everything is still able to use Databricks right now.
Correct. Yes.
And is there like any compatibility? Like, does it work with most AI models or?
It does, but again, when you sort of like work for big enterprise companies, like we are also like very. I agree that all of these data models are available in one click away. But again, like if you think about it, it's still customer data. So for us, customer data is fairly important to us. So we don't generally experiment way too much with customer assets and customer data as such, but what we do is within the realm of governance, we try to like work with our security teams and legal teams just to pick a few data models and see like how we can sort of like scale our data foundations and our data value.
Yeah, yeah. So going back a little bit on Facebook, was it more of the consumer data, or was it like internal within? Like, what was the role? Like, was it more on internal tools, or was it more on the consumer facing tools?
So I worked on the ads side of it. So if you think about it, that's the monetizing machine for Facebook. And primarily, like my team was responsible for the security of ads. So if you think about it, there's a lot of like fraudulent ads up there.
Mhm.
There are a lot of like bad ad content.
Oh,
So
yeah, it's crazy.
yeah,
Yeah,
the,
I
the
run ads. I run ads for myself, and I'm like, since I was coming from a tech world, people are going to like be like accounts have been stolen because they were running ads.
Exactly, right? And Facebook back then and until now, like for us, or at least back then and now, like the user data again is fairly important. If you think about it, Facebook's ad engine is so powerful. It actually knows what you want and when you want certain
Yeah,
things, right?
yeah,
Done well, it's going to bring in more money to the company. So my team and was really, really proud in sort of like being a huge contributor
mhm,
in terms of like catching a bunch of these fraudulent stuff, etc. So if you think about it, it's a lot of still consumer facing stuff,
yeah,
but again, a lot of like rules and regulations sitting on top of that.
yeah, yeah. Makes sense. And so, like, what's the largest data? Is it like a data set or a database that you've worked with? Like, is it even possible to calculate like how big it is?
It's crazy. And again, as I said, the scale of Facebook is just immense. So like we're talking literally about like billions of rows. So the data sets are pretty huge. But again, like if you think about it, a company like Facebook, they've figured out data foundations. Like their data foundation is extremely strong,
Yeah.
where all of these partitions and everything sort of helps data scientists to sort of like get
Mhm.
access to that data a lot easier and sort of like manipulate data a lot easier than probably like other companies.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. And then how was the transition going from that to Atlassian? Like where I think Atlassian, the primary is going to be corporate users, right?
Correct, exactly. Great question. So the shift from sort of like ads integrity into product analytics was a huge shift. So on the ad side of it, as I was saying, it's more about safety of end users, right? Like how do you use ML models to figure out bad content? And now you go into a sort of a big SaaS company who's also like sort of growing at a very quick pace. It's more about how do you drive business value to the end customer. So like if you think about it, it's two different things here.
Yeah.
And from a data standpoint, Atlassian literally taught me the value of data storytelling and sort of like working with product managers and engineers to build the right product for the right set of customers.
Hmm.
So the viewpoint as a data science manager in Atlassian was hugely different. It's about driving revenue. It's about driving monthly active users. It's about driving expansion within customers and so on. So it's a different ball game altogether.
Yeah.
So there, the outcome is not about how fancy your ML models are. The outcome is what's the impact data is driving to improve the overall like Atlassian revenue. That's how you sort of like think about it.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. And like if somebody's trying to enter the world, like how should somebody approach? Like it might be a very different work environment, a work culture. You've worked in consulting and like you worked across different countries as well. Can you share like how if somebody is new coming into the industry and is interested in data sciences, how should they be approaching this industry?
Yeah, no, a great question. See, we are entering in a world where the data manipulation or understanding of data is getting a lot easier. And as you were mentioning a lot earlier, there are tools in everybody's hands which makes life a lot easier. Excel, like a simple example, like Excel back then to Excel right now,
Yeah.
a drastic difference in what you can do. Like a single line click to do regression in an Excel sheet, that is just crazy if you
Yeah.
think about
Yeah, I think there
it.
used to be a limit of like 65,000 rows when I started with Excel.
Right, so it is crazy, right? So like for me, my advice to any sort of like people like budding people is don't forget the non-technical side of data. That's the advice I always tell people. Like even when I speak to interns or like budding people who ask me advice, life is not just technical right now. Like you need to tell the story with data, right? And telling the story with data basically means that you need to understand the audience behind who you're telling the story to. So that's the piece where people generally like don't put in a lot of effort. So like what I would say is technical, it's fairly important. Understand what's happening in the world of AI.
Mhm.
Understand core statistical concepts. There is no point in getting into ML modeling without understanding statistics. You need to understand base statistics.
Mhm.
Secondly, like whatever people may say, SQL is the heart of everything, even now, right? Get your SQL foundations right. Like become strong in SQL and
Mhm.
read a ton of case studies. Like go through these company websites. Each company website has a bunch of case studies around what did we do, like how did data help them grow, and so on. The more and more you read through those case studies, the more and more ideas you get around. Hey, like these metrics are useful here. And if I want to build these metrics, how do I go about it? And if I want to build an ML model to predict these metrics, how do I go about it? So it's sort of reverse engineering from a case study to sort of like what you want to learn through
Yeah.
data.
Yeah. Makes sense. And then let's say somebody wants to enter the industry. So I think you mentioned like in addition to the technical skills, like it will still be SQL and maybe 3 or 4 different additional specific skill sets. I think the most important one you mentioned was people skills and the ability to understand business, right? Uh, how what do you think like somebody needs more of a business background to do this, or how can like if somebody is only and like if they're done graduate or undergraduate and only done technical education, how do they make that jump?
Yeah, great question. In my viewpoint, I wouldn't say you need a business degree to get into this, right? But having said that, the place where business intersection with data becomes fairly important is where, as I was mentioning earlier, get through these case studies, understand like what business is all about. So if you take my example, right? I started in consulting, where obviously like we were working with government contracts back then, but then moved into a startup world, which was more about audience targeting, etc. Then moved into healthcare, from
Mm-hmm.
healthcare to social media, from social media to sort of core SaaS product. Each of these sections, in my opinion, not a ton of intersection across each of these,
Yeah.
right? But having said that, the place where it helped me the most is by interacting with a bunch of business folks, just to understand, hey, what's top of mind for you? What do you want? Where do you want the data guy to come in and help you out there?
Yeah.
So for people who are doing their undergrad or graduate, what I would suggest to them is get out of your comfort shell and start interacting with people outside of your university. So
Mhm.
maybe you have an uncle who works in a company. Try to talk with them in understanding, hey, like what does your company do? What are some of the success measures? What your company thinks about, and so on. And try to understand what's specific about each domain and how varied each domains are. So for me, understanding that domain skill will actually take you places.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, in addition to all the work that you do, what do you like to do outside of work? Like, do you play any sports?
Yeah, as I said, like I'm a big outdoor person, and thanks to my wife, my passion for outdoors have actually like increased significantly. Love to go hiking. So like we have an internal goal, or at least a family goal, where we try to visit at least like 2 to 3 national parks every year.
Wow,
So
nice.
that is a goal. So just recently we were in New Mexico, like trying to visit a bunch of these like national parks. So that's one goal for me. Two, I am and again born and raised in India, a huge fan of cricket, as I mentioned before. So I have a team here where I play regularly. Plus, again, a huge cricket buff. Like being in the US, a lot of these cricket games actually start at 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning, and I'm one
Yeah,
of those crazy cricket fans where I don't need an alarm to wake up at 3 in the morning to go watch the game.
yeah, yeah. That is amazing. Yeah, I know there is some games going on even right now, right?
Right?
So, yeah,
Yeah.
I think unfortunately India is doing pretty good in most most of the definitely helps.
Yep, absolutely.
So, going forward, like where do you see the trend within the data sciences, or with even outside the data sciences? Maybe like what are some of the things that you are most excited about in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, as everyone speaks about the same thing, AI is getting bigger and bigger.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of aspects which sort of personally interest me in the AI space. One is obviously agentic AI, right? So the value of agents coming into play, not just from a business standpoint, but also from a productivity standpoint. So there are a ton of agents sort of coming into sort of improving efficiency of how people work, right? So it could be like a data science efficiency. It could be like literally like changing the life of a product manager, changing the life of a business analyst, as an example. So, like a great example here is I know of a startup who is trying to sort of like automate a bunch of CAD drawings where you just give like simple language information and it sort of like builds CAD drawings. So just imagine the amount of efficiency it would save on a drafter going
Yeah.
forward. So really looking forward to this agentic AI space. So many cool things coming up in this space.
Yeah. What is that called? Like the thing you mentioned about uh, like developing, like your friend is working on that with an Adobe suite of software for drafting.
Correct, exactly. And again, LLM is still the heart of all of this, but again, they're trying to figure out to build these blueprints,
Mm-hmm.
to understand what can improve in these blueprints, to ask questions on a blueprint, right? Like 2 years, or forget about 2 years, like even 6 months back to a year back, there's no way we could have even thought of use cases like that. And that's just one simple use case. But
Yeah.
the concept of AI sort of improving efficiency in different facets of human life
Mhm.
is it's just incredible.
Yeah.
The second area, which I'm personally extremely passionate about, is more about the data foundations to build things. So, like a great example where things are coming to fruition is about like building these knowledge graphs. So in the past, again, companies like Facebook have mastered knowledge graphs. So it knows that this particular person is associated to this person likes something, this person likes something. So they know to understand the interactions between people and some of the commonalities, which sort of like brings them together. So in the world of AI, if you think about it, and let's assume you have a chatbot in front of you and you just want to ask a question, the chatbot should realize that okay, this particular entity is sort of associated to multiple things and it should give a holistic answer to you rather than just giving like a single dimensional answer. And the way that's happening right now is companies are building these powerful knowledge graphs as foundations where your LLM applications sort of sit on top of these knowledge graphs and sort of like help you sort of connect the dots across the board. So that's another area where I'm extremely passionate about. So if you go look at my LinkedIn, there are a couple of like these notebook LLM based podcasts what I've started like loading around like knowledge graphs.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. And so within do you think there will be like a big explosion of amount of data that people are storing going forward, just because there will be more automation, more tools, and more resources to be able to like use it in a more productive way?
100%, right? And it's not just the advent of AI here. I think the value of data has just increased over the past few years, right? And AI is just an outcome of that. So if you think about it, the concept of these LLMs came into fruition because they had a ton of data to train these LLMs on. And with a bunch of these like hardware and storage companies also improving their efficiency, the cost is the only factor here. As years go by, obviously cost goes down and down, right? So the explosion of data is just gonna get crazier and crazier. The only aspect where, or the primary aspect where companies have to be really careful about and should be top of mind is governance. What sort of governance you place on top of data rather than just AI going berserk, where Like we have literally no control of data. And I think that's where companies have to be really, really careful about.
Yeah, I can imagine if a human being gets overloaded with information, we don't want our AI to go crazy either.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, there will definitely be a point when wrong data or wrong inputs might be the reason why something is not
Absolutely.
performing or not doing the right uh, options. Right, it won't be just about learning and stuff.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So apart from that, like what are some of the like we are almost like towards the end of the episode, but just before we conclude, wanted to open up the floor and like just ask, are there like anything else that you would like to share with the audience?
The to your earlier question on like these budding data scientists and budding data people, what I would like to tell them is things are changing so quickly, but don't get nervous or scared by this change.
Mm-hmm.
Because data, like in at least the 15-20 years I've been in, have been constantly changing. Just that AI is a different kind of change coming into the market.
Yeah.
So don't get scared by it, or don't get nervous by that. Instead, I would say like embrace it. There are so many courses online. There are so many people who you can look up to and start following, etc. Right? So take this opportunity in both hands. As you're young, obviously the space is so wide, the opportunities are so much. So all I would say is embrace AI more than get nervous about it.
That's a very big key point. Thanks for sharing that. So anyone that's coming in the industry, uh, it feels like a wide world, like just completely crazy. Right? There's like very easy to get distracted as well. Saying, hey, one day I want to do a full stack development, next day I want to do mobile development, third day I want to do something else. You'll figure out something that you like, and then focus on that, and don't be intimidated by any big buzzwords.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the larger the buzzword, generally the easier it is to tame it. So, and the larger the buzzword, the more resources and help will be available. So don't be worried about picking up anything that interests you.
Correct. Absolutely.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks Ajay for coming on the show. I'll go ahead share this with all my audiences as well, and it was a pleasure having you today on the show.
Thank you so much, Amish, and lovely catching up with you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
That's a wrap on today's episode of Main Street Minds. Want to share your journey with our audience? Head over to mainstreetmindspodcast.com/guest to apply.